So obviously yesterday, seismic day for America.
Huge
team.
Yeah.
Because the Dallas Cowboys traded for Jonathan Mingo.
It was America's team, aggressive at the trade deadline. Aggressive.
Fixing it. Going after Mingo.
Your guy. If you think about Mingo and Cooper Rush together,
Skip must be over the moon.
39th pick in the draft just a year ago.
Yeah. Even as somebody that was like driving the Jonathan Mingo support bandwagon at draft time, I'm amazed they had to give up this draft pick to get him, to bring him over. Like, various people are tweeting out all-time futility stats for Jonathan Mingo. Now, I do think that they are skewed because year one, Bryce Young was barely functional. He was also, I think, played out of position. There are things that were dragging that down. But nonetheless, these are reasons you don't have to play full market value for a guy, right? And giving up, okay, they get a bit of it back. It's not exactly, but it nets out, I think, to basically a fifth-round draft pick, which I still think is pretty...
They gave up a 4. They got back a 7.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a little pick swap in there. I know there's more to it, but it is hard for me to reconcile DeAndre Hopkins for a conditional 5 that could become a 4 if they, win the Super Bowl in Kansas City.
Right.
Amari Cooper for a 3. I know there's other exchanges in there. Mingo, Deontay Johnson from the Panthers for almost nothing to the Ravens, and then Mingo for a 4. The difference there is that Cooper, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, they're all older, a lot more money attached to it, or multiple year contracts that you're going to be, dealing with. Now, Deontay Johnson doesn't have that, but Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins have that.
Right.
Versus 2 years of the cost control Jonathan Mingo, right? Like, I understand there's a contract aspect of that, but it's also tough for me to reconcile year 2 receiver who's done literally nothing for a 4 versus DeAndre Hopkins, who seemingly is going to transform the Chiefs offense and make them even more favorites for the Super Bowl for being, it's a tough disconnect for me right now.
I honestly can't believe it was that pricey. Like, the cost was that high. Like, I genuinely don't understand it. I mean, I get...
I think Eric called Jerry and got the deal done.
Maybe. I mean, I get the approach of, they like that guy at draft time, right? Not enough to draft him, but they liked him. So, look, he's not worked out in Carolina. They're willing to move him. Let's go get him. I'm fine with that. Now, you can argue whether that's a smart way of doing business. Maybe you were wrong at draft time based off the current evidence of him not playing well. But I get that. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. But that steep price.
Now, if it was a 7, if it was like you traded
that's what I'm saying, right?
Mingo.
So, pick another guy that hasn't worked out in the last couple of drafts that you really liked at draft time, right? Flip a 7 through a conditional 6th rounder for those guys. Okay, cool.
And I know you liked Mingo more than me. You liked him more than others. Mm-hmm. I still saw him as he's big and fast.
Yeah.
And he's got hit or miss ball skills down the field, but he's made some really nice catches. And I'm always of the mind of I'm looking for a wide receiver 4 that could be the guy that averages 18 to 20 yards per catch in my offense as a wide receiver 4. I saw Mingo as more of that guy. You saw him as more. And so on the surface, I don't hate the Cowboys trying to get a developmental receiver because they need one, right? They need guys to complement CeeDee Lamb. And they're trying Jalen Tolbert, and they're trying, Brandon Cooks is getting older. I don't mind that as a developmental player, but probably not for a 4.
Yeah.
And it would pick
right.
essentially a
Giving
5.
Up a 4th-round pick for that, even if you're getting stuff back and it nets out to a 5th. It's just, that's expensive for somebody that, again, genuinely has shown absolutely nothing, and in fact, statistically, is currently looking like one of the worst wide receivers to ever play the game.
It's also, we joke a lot about, if I was GM, if I was in the seat, I think my biggest blind spot, because I hate on scouts all the time and joke about scouts all the time being in person, right? In this blind spot. If you're in person for the game, that's great or bad. How much does that weigh in your brain versus the other 12 games? Is it biased? I feel like my blind spot and weakness would be my draft priors.
Oh, I would always be, if a guy I liked hasn't worked out and is available for pennies on the dollar, I would always kick the tires on those guys.
Yes, blame the system, blame Bryce Young, blame the Panthers. Right. We're going to get because again, the perspective, Mike T, our boss, who's already been called out here, his initial reaction was something to the effect of the Cowboys just traded a 4, essentially a 5, for the number 39 overall pick in last year's draft.
Right.
That is a different perspective and, you know, a fair one, despite Mingo in a year and a half showing nothing at the NFL level.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, I mean, there's a lot of guys that do not work out because of the situation they landed in, right? That's a reality. That's absolutely a thing that happens on a yearly basis in the NFL. Players land at a team, and that's the reason they're not going to survive in the NFL. And a fresh start, is, as it's always billed as, suddenly rejuvenates these guys. What that really means is they just found a better environment and a place that fits their skill set better, right? Whether it's schematic, whether it's personnel derived, i.e. the quarterback situation upgrades, all these kinds of things. So that's definitely a factor. It's not always what happens, though. Like, there are guys that don't work out because they're just not good and everybody missed on them. But I think it's very difficult sometimes to distill out the reasons why guys haven't worked out. So if you did really like somebody at the draft and suddenly they're available for very little in terms of trade compensation or even free agency, you know, once they get cut or whatever, I would constantly be kicking the tires on those guys. Even if you come to the same conclusion, you know, it turns out we just missed. Turns out everyone else, you know, people that didn't like him were right. He's not very good. Let's move on. As long as it's not a big cost doing that, I'm all for it. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.